in and take a look around and get some relaxation in while you can. This fort was established in 1843 right here along the Oregon, California, and Mormon trails. As you come on in, you kind of notice that there really isn't much to this fort. People who've been traveling for a long time on the trail, they've been out there for at least a month, at least early on, without being able to buy supplies. And they were pretty excited to get here to Fort Bridger where they could get some supplies. Unfortunately, a lot of people were expecting something a little bit more grand than you find here. What you see here at the fort is pretty much exactly how it looked back in 1843. They did just have the two buildings here and the fence. If you read a lot of the journals of the people who were visiting, they weren't real impressed with a couple of shacks and a falling down fence. But we did have the supplies and the repair shop that they needed. So what we have is we have in one building, they had the store and the blacksmith, and then the other building, those were the living quarters for Jim Bridger and his partner. Each of them had a room for themselves and their family. You'll see that the flags are flying. They wanted to have that flag up there so that people traveling a long ways away could see that the fort was here and they were almost to Fort Bridger where they could get the supplies they wanted. If you take a look at the roofs on our buildings, you'll notice that they're a little bit different than the roofs that you would see today. See, there's a little grass and weeds up there. Can you think of why we would have a grass roof? There are actually three kind of reasons that they would use that. Number one, the materials weren't there, but also if you had a wood roof, you'll notice that there are some chimneys on top of our roof. What comes out of a chimney? Get some sparks and some fire, right? If we had a wood roof, our building, it might burn down pretty fast. Now having the sod roof, which is what we call those, isn't going to stop a fire completely, but it would give me some time to probably get it out before my entire building burns down. The other thing that we have going for us that dirt is going to do is it's going to help absorb water. So when rain falls, it's going to help suck up that water rather than having it go right through our building. Now our buildings do leak. They did back then too. There's plenty of rain that comes through. If you get a heavy rainstorm, lots of water is going to end up in your house or your building. The other reason that we have a sod roof is also why we have mud in the walls of our building. And that's because it's going to help keep the building insulated. It's going to help keep it cool in the summer and warmish in the winter. It's going to help keep that wind from tearing through like we have here in Wyoming. So it's going to help us stay a little bit more comfortable. Buildings aren't entirely comfortable, but they're the best that you can do out here. And the people who are living out here, man, this was real living. You had a nice, steady building that stays in one place. You're not out in the elements. So when people came to Fort Bridger, this is what they wanted. You wanted a nice place where you could get the stuff you need and you could get it repaired. So our blacksmith shop originally was one of the only ones within like 500 miles. And if you head west from here, that's where you're really going to start hit the mountains. So this was the first time where people were really going to hit those really tall mountains. And the thing that you're really going to need is a wagon that's in the best repair that it can be in. So you're going to use that blacksmith and get things like your wagon wheels and the tongue and those kinds of things repaired so that you can head out on the road with your car in the best shape you can, right? Your wagon in the best shape you can get it. You're also going to be able to resupply, so if you don't have food or you need some sort of tool or maybe some ammunition to go hunting with, you would be able to buy that here. If you've ever been, when you go out like on a road trip, you often need to stop, right? You need to stop and refuel and get some gas, and you might need to get some food, or you might need to use the bathroom or just kind of relax. This here at the fort is sort of like the truck stop of the 1850s, right? This is the place where you're going to be able to get all that thing. Now the other issue is, like I said, today you would get fuel. Back then you would have animals pulling your cart. So in that case, what you'd want to do is you might want to replace your animals who just come 1,000 miles and were really tired, and might be sick or injured, you could replace them here, get some fresh, rested, well-fed animals, or just give your own animals a little bit of chance to relax where there's some grass and some water, because there's not a whole lot of water out here. They would have just come across that desert, and they're going to be heading out across even more desert as they go out. So this is a good place for them to just kind of relax and get some freshened up for the rest of the journey, because the hard part, that's the stuff that's coming up. One of the things that they would do is they would come in on that wagon trail over here. When you walked in, you can't really see it, but what we're looking at right there is the actual trail that people came on. So you can see it came right in front of Fort Bridger, which makes it a lot easier. The first travelers that came through here were just looking to go to Oregon, but later on we had a second group of people that came through, and they are our second M of our 5 M's. That you guys remember what that group is. That's the Mormons. And the Mormons were on their way to Salt Lake City. They first came through here in 1847 to establish themselves in Salt Lake City. Later on, they actually acquired the fort here and established themselves at the fort. Bridger had left at that point, and they were here at the fort. And they were here for a few years, and then they had a little bit of some difficulties with the U.S. government, and they were afraid that the army was going to come and attack them. So when they heard that the army was coming, they actually burned Fort Bridger down to the ground to keep the army from being able to use this place for their supplies. So what we're looking at is a replica of the fort as it appeared. As not the original one, because as I said, the Mormons burned it down and they didn't rebuild, obviously, the same way it looked before. So let's head in and kind of see what the inside of that building looks like.
Places like this, back in the day, you didn't have your 7-Elevens and your gas stations, but in the time, this was a local gas station. So you could stop in here, you could replenish your supplies, you could trade it up for animals, that kind of thing. So they were really important, and there wasn't very many of them along the Oregon Trail at that time. You might go 400 or 500 miles between posts or forts or whatever you want to call them at the time. So they were really important, and you could get your work done on your wagons, trade up, like I said, for fresh animals, replenish your coffee and beans and sugars and flour and that kind of thing. So they were pretty important, and the blacksmith was an intricate part of it, because he could fix the wagons. He could fix the tools that you might break along the way. You had your regular variety of garden tools that you needed day to day, so there was a lot of things he could fix. And you would think some of the items that he would make, he'd have to build these horseshoes from nothing. And by doing that, he would start out, you can see it kind of resembles it. It's just a rough start of one. We'll just do it kind of in stages to show you how it's done. There's that one. Actually, we've got a smaller one right here that to the same effect, but it's a square one. It's made out of a different stock, so it would take it a little bit a different style to do that one. So there's all kinds of stuff that a blacksmith can make. The horseshoes, he has to make the nails. You can see the little nails that hold the horseshoe on. He has to make them. You can't just run down to the local hardware store and buy one, so you run to the local hardware store, which is the blacksmith shop. And he makes nails. You notice they're square. They didn't start round nails till into the 1900s, and they were all square nails, just like that. Various sizes, from the horseshoe nails this size. If you kind of look around this blacksmith shop, you can kind of see that there's logs that have to be nailed together, door planks that have to be nailed together. So there is different sizes of nails that that he would be making. Nails were very important. They were in high demand, so they would be something he would be doing if he didn't have another project going. He would be making nails. The apprentice, which he would always have an apprentice that would generally start out at the age of 12 or 8 years old, excuse me. He would move right into a place similar to this. He would have a bed, say over here in this corner, and it would be his home for the next 8 to 10 years. He would just live right here. He'd have to get up early in the morning, build a fire for the blacksmith, get his tools out, get all the stuff ready to go for that day. And he would spend a lot of time pumping the bellows, keeping the fire hot, so that when the blacksmith did show up, he'd just go straight to work. As you can see, there very important part of a blacksmith's job is this forge right here. It is the way he heats up the iron. The bellows behind it is a big blower type thing that pumps air into the fire. To get a fire, you need heat, you need fuel, and you need oxygen. Well, air is full of oxygen, and the more air you pump into a fire, the hotter it gets. So that's why we do the pumping on the bellows, is to put more oxygen into the fire, make fire, and the hotter more air it gets. Okay, kind of looks pretty good right there. Actually, one reason it's kind of dark in here is you can kind of see the color of the iron. But you notice how easy that bends around here when it's hot. If it was just regular cold, it wouldn't bend near that easy. I can shape it whatever I want to. Make a nice little hook. And on some of this iron, if I smash that back down like that, if I need a little bit of iron that's thicker and wider than what I've got there, then I can fold it back into itself like that, heat it up, pound it together, and it'll actually weld itself together, and you'll have thicker iron than what you started out with. And that's how they had to make all kind of iron they have. They only had a few pieces of stock, and then they had to make whatever they wanted out of that stock. So that's one way they can do that. But this one, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to just cool it off. You don't normally do that because it makes the iron brittle. We'll talk about tempering a little bit here. A piece of iron that needs to be tempered is that chisel right there. And what I mean by tempering is regular iron that's like this is pretty soft, and it won't hold what you call hold an edge. This edge right here, if it was to be sharp like a knife, it would not hold an edge very well. When you start cutting and using it, the sharpness would go away. And by tempering it, you make this iron it would be harder than what it is normally, and by doing that is in the way you cool it off. And you can cool it off in water like I just did, which is not good. That makes it brittle, and it would break and chip really bad. To do it right, you would either use an oil, or you could stick this into a sandbank and let it cool real slow. Depending on what kind of a temper and how hard you want it to be, is by the way you'd cool it off.
So this is the trading post. You'll notice it's a very small building. There's not a whole lot in here. You have dirt floors. This building, or this room that you're looking at, is the same size as the living quarters of Jim Bridger too. So if you can imagine on a place like this, how small it would be to have your entire family living in a building like this. It's a little dark too. You'll notice that there's not a whole lot of light in this building. Because this is a shop, we have multiple windows. If you were living in this room, you would not have windows like that. They didn't have glass. The windows would have been open, and they cover them with a block of wood, and then they would stuff sort of the edges with furs or whatever to try and keep the wind and the cold out. So you're going to be trapped in a building like this all winter long with your entire family in the dark. Your only light's going to be something like this, a little bit of a fire. The fire, when I'm close to it, is nice and comfortable. As I get further away, this building stays cold all the time. You're not going to be real comfortable. If you were living in a room like this, there'd probably only be one bed. That bed would be for the adults in the family. As a child, where do you think you might be sleeping? You're going to be sleeping on the floor. So they would probably have some kind of fur for you to lay on and curl up with some blankets, but you're going to be sleeping on this cold floor. Like I said earlier, it does rain in these buildings, so the floor is wet. It can be pretty muddy. It's not super comfortable. There are plenty of bugs and mice and other fun things in these buildings. But you would be safe in here. It'd be nice and warm. We've been in a Wyoming winter. Sometimes you can have snow several feet high. Last year, we actually had some snowdrifts that were taller than the buildings here at the fort. So the snow even today can get that high. So if you think about that, you're not going to be able to leave, and you're not going to be able to go out and have school or something or go see your friends. You're going to be trapped in a room with your whole family for 4, 5, maybe even 6 months. So what do you think they might have been doing during those times to keep themselves busy if you're trapped in a building? Might play some games. You have to come up with some creative way to do things. Other than that, what you're going to be doing is you're going to have to do the types of things that you wouldn't do in the summer. The things that you can only do inside when you don't need to be outside chopping wood or feeding animals or harvesting crops or something that you would be doing in the summer. So you would be maybe sewing, you might be making some bullets, you might be doing some sort of metalwork, making tools or those kinds of things. You might be learning to read or doing some schoolwork. It would be difficult. It would depend on whether your parents have any education. Jim Bridger did not know how to read. He considered that a problem for himself, so he wanted to make sure all of his children could read, and he did send them off to school so that they could learn those things, because that was an important skill. If your family did know how to read, it wasn't like you had lots of books. Books were very expensive, so what you might have is probably you would have a family Bible, and that would be the thing that you would use to learn to read with. That would also get you your religion teaching too. There wouldn't be a minister, you wouldn't be going to church, and at that time some people that would be very important to them, that you would read from the Bible at night or something. Other than that, you'd just be trapped in a room for a good winter long, waiting for the spring when you could go outside and get out. And as you guys have been probably quarantined, probably understanding a little bit better how those people were living in a one room with your whole family, get a better idea. You're not going to school and you're not being able to go out with your friends. So maybe this year gives you a better experience of how those people were living too.